Hello, my name is Dr. Christopher R. Doolin, and this is the test that I've created for couples. It's called the Relational Process Litmus Test, and it is the source of the book I'm writing called The Proof is in the Process. Question is, why do we have to have relational rules? Well, it reminds me of something on the WISC, which is an intelligence scale for kids, on the comprehension section, that asks the questions, why do games have rules? Well, games have rules specifically to promote fairness. And why do we need fairness? Why do we need relational rules? Well, from my perspective, human nature dictates that human conflict is inevitable. People are controlling or seek power first and foremost for security purposes. Sort of like the movie Men in Black, when Will Smith finds out that there's aliens on the planet, and he tells Tommy Lee Jones, come on, man, why don't you tell people? People can handle it. People are smart. Tommy Lee Jones says, a person is smart. People are dumb, scared, panicky animals, and you know it. Now, I see this constantly and can argue this both from a biblical or religious perspective, which encompasses the three major religions of Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. In the Bible, in the Garden of Eden story, where the snake comes to Eve and says to Eve, hey Eve, why don't you eat of the fruit of this tree? And Eve says, because God tells us we'll surely die. And the snake responds, Eve, you're not going to die. God only doesn't want you to eat of the fruit of that tree for one reason, because if you do, you will become like God. And then she eats the fruit, and then she gives it to her husband. So the basic story is human rebellion against God, and that's based on power. People wanting to be their own little tin gods, wanting to have the power of God. If you want to argue it from an evolutionary perspective, I can do that too. Because wherever humans have gone, they've dominated the earth, chasing out the other big animals, then fighting for territory amongst ourselves. After we beat all the other big animals, they didn't really stand a chance, and now we continually fight for power against each other in order to control each other. That's why Thomas Jefferson said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Well, why do we have to have vigilance? Why do we constantly try to put each other in slavery or control each other? Because, number one, people are controlling and they seek power. Humans want to act as their own little tin gods. And one of the best examples of this is what I constantly run across with people, which is people when they talk about their memory. Oh, I know, I remember perfectly. And the reality is that memory is quite susceptible to perception as well. So, in talking about human nature, this is the assumption that I'm making about why people don't get along. After seeing so many couples over the years and realizing people have their own difficulties, I've had to come to the conclusion that there's 4 basic reasons why people don't get along, why they have difficulty getting along, or 4 ingredients to conflict. Number 1, people constantly seek to control their environments. Number 2, humans are self-centered perceptually. What that means is that people are controlling and they're self-centered. They see things from their own perspective. Number 3, even though we're controlling and self-centered, we still need to belong together. We're wired interpersonally. Humans are much more like lions than they are tigers. Lions are the only social cat that there is that lives together in groups, and so do humans. And number 4, humans are very reflexive in their reactions to others and highly unaware of the invisible process that's going on between them. And that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, because of the incredible capacity of the human brain, that our brain is able to do over 1 quadrillion operations per second. And because of the mirror neurons that we possess in our brain that allow us to feel what other people feel oftentimes, and then to immediately react to it. So to me, that's the basis of reflexivity between people. Now, it's not enough that people know what to do in their relationships. It's necessary to discipline ourselves to override human nature. For instance, I see people constantly using you statements rather than I statements, even though they know that using an I statement's healthier and it's more fair. People still continually switch to you, as if they could talk about that person from an objective viewpoint. Why? Because people seek power in their relationship. So it's the self-discipline to override our human propensity toward little tin godness that causes us to break the rules. In other words, we want what we want when we want it. However, when we hold ourselves accountable at first, it clarifies the relationship and gets one to see who the other person really is. It also gives us a freedom to set boundaries with others, and when we're able to give ourselves permission to set boundaries, our own personal power in the relationship increases, as does our own worth to the other person. Problem with control, however, is that as much as we want to control, we resist being controlled by others. And we also have the need to belong with others, a la Adler. So there's that constant conflict between the need to control and the need to belong, and I think that that's the quintessential struggle. Now, the rules that I've created really help to rope you in. Jules is my daughter-in-law, and she's gone over them with my son, and they practice the rules. In fact, they practice them right in front of me, and it makes me so proud. And she says it really ropes you in to work on your relationship because people want to play games, and so helps expose those kinds of games. And I want to emphasize is the commitment to the rules that's important, not being perfect in them. We all make mistakes, and because we're controlling and self-centered, there are times in which our own human nature takes over. So in this sense, failure is not in the falling down. Rather, failure is in the risk, is the not getting back up again. That is being committed to working on the rules. I tell my patients constantly that it's not about being perfect. It's about being committed to the process of conflict resolution that brings about a balanced relationship. These are process rules. They're not content rules. They're not rules about sex or money or other areas that people would argue about content areas. They're process rules, how people deal with their conflict in the moment. Giving the clinician another lens to see oneself and others through a litmus test for relational readiness. Now, what is a litmus test? Well, in chemistry, a litmus test, if you have a piece of litmus paper and you, for instance, put it in a liquid and it turns blue, well, that's what's considered a litmus test. There may be an acid or something that shows it. A pregnancy test is a litmus test. It says either you are pregnant or you're not pregnant, whether there's an effect or whether there's not an effect. In terms of my litmus test, it's about relational readiness and the willingness for people to share control and power in their relationship. The quintessential 10 rules of relationship, if not followed, an individual's relationships risk failure. Now, that doesn't mean if you follow the rules necessarily that it's going to save your relationship. What it's going to do is clarify your relationship, however. And all rules flow from number 1, which in some way all the rules measure some form of the person's willingness to be fair, take responsibility for themselves first in the relationship, and to be able to share power. And we will continue this in the next PowerPoint.